FLX Rapid Response Network is a Finger Lakes regional team coming together to respond to immediate needs caused by immigration policies that destroy people's lives. We focus on emergency response, aftermath, and community building.
We run actions and events for education, empowerment, gratitude, and support. Our volunteers have accompanied our community members to court dates and consulate visits. We've helped connect people to legal resources and danced together for International Women's Day.
We stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, against police brutality, and in support of reinvesting in community-led institutions and organizations. We advocate for structural change, and we celebrate victories across many issues because we can see how these issues are interconnected.
We helped organize one of the car caravans in Geneva, New York, to highlight the self-sacrificing roles of food chain workers during the pandemic.
La fortaleza y belleza de nuestra red es que podemos representar a nuestras diferentes organizaciones, trabajar con el objetivo común de abogar por los derechos de la comunidad inmigrante.
Our volunteers cooked meals and delivered them to farm workers who lost jobs due to COVID. We've trained rapid responders to witness and document ICE detention. We've provided training on knowing your rights and immigration laws to our community.
Con el tiempo nos hicimos amigos. Por ejemplo, Miriam y su familia no tenían abogado para defender su caso de asilo cuando nos conocimos. Después de un GoFundMe, después de encontrar una buena abogada, y después de 2 años, somos amigos.
Si es que me están grabando, pues es para agradecerle a todas las personas que nos han ayudado, y especialmente a Graviela, a Melina, porque en verdad nos han ayudado en mucho. Pues en ustedes hemos encontrado unas buenas personas que también nos han ayudado y tal vez a otras personas, pero Dios que los bendiga y que los cuide.
We want to say thanks to our partners, especially Rural and Migrant Ministry. RMM's creativity, their vision and energy inspires us every day. We are learning so much from them about the needs people have, about the changes we want to see in our region, and about how to work together collaboratively for meaningful change.
Wow.
Finger Lakes Rapid Response Network is a Finger Lakes.
Okay. So, well, thank you, Wilmer. This is, so we're going to move right along. As you can see, it's a powerful we, right? It's a we of individuals in the different agencies that we wear many hats. And I think the idea when we get especially to look at our regional partners is the strength of, yes, individuals coming together, but individuals that also bring with them the resources and the agencies and the different initiatives that they've been involved in. So there are names, there are many more names, with always, the risk of listing names is that we forget many other names, but think of it as just a sample of, of so many that have helped. And so I will now move on to the agenda for today. We will start with some thoughts on being a respectful ally, very important in the work that we do. We all do, I think. We're here virtually together. National and regional context, ICE, and some other aspects, right? Because although this is the day after inauguration and there's great hope in the country right now, let's not forget that immigration policy, whether it goes Republicans, Democrats, has always been a constant, has been an issue, that threats. It's a constant threat to so many in our community. So then an overview of our emergency response and aftermath. We'll go into breakout rooms to practice and discuss, and then ways to get involved towards the end, Q&A, and optional, but very important, hoping the optional will be, yes, we're all gonna join, you sign up for the rapid response. So thank you very much, muchas gracias, right? And now we move to my dear friend Beverly Servant from Finger Lakes Health, and she will take the baton from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra. So what are we going to cover in being a respectful ally? What we really mean by that is there's lots of things that are changing, especially with immigration law, and the immigrants' needs are complicated. So we want to make sure that we keep up to date, that we know what we're doing when we're working with people that we're helping. A lot of them have circumstances that are very challenging. Every circumstance is different. Every case is different. The individual situations are unique. And there are lots of kinds of non-citizen status, even with the category of undocumented. Some under ICE supervision have permissions to stay here until they get the deportation order. So we want to make sure that people understand these different categories. And one thing to keep in mind is that we hope that people that join don't see this as something as the white savior syndrome. We're here to help and support the people that we're trying to work with. Next slide. So we want to make sure that we are keep empowering the affected people at the center. We want to make sure that we are aware of stereotypes that limit our ability to imagine resourcefulness. Work as a team. When we mean about working as a team in the training, you'll see that there are lots of times that people are called to show up at a place, but many other cases that we work with are helping deliver masks, deliver food. We want to make sure that people don't just show up on a farm alone, especially if this is the first time that they're doing something. So work as a team or in pairs. Know your limits. If people are uncomfortable doing something, we do say that please let us know that so that we don't put people in uncomfortable situations. Mistakes happen and mistakes have big repercussions. So we want to make sure that if there is a mistake that you ask for help immediately, tell us about it. And one of the cases is there was a housing site where the situation was horrible and the good intentions of reporting it ended up having all the people on that farm fired. So we want to make sure that when you're helping, it doesn't actually backfire and cause more damage. Next slide. So we do have lots of organizations and coalitions that work with us. But one of the things we want to point out is once you start working with us or before you even start working with us, we ask that people become educated, informed. So there's more information here. The American Civil Liberties Union Immigrants' Rights has lots of information. All of these websites and groups are going to be shared with the people on this call. The New York Immigration Coalition provides lots of information also, lots of meetings, updates on what the latest laws are, how to advocate. The Cornell Farm Worker Program is very involved in helping farm workers, and many of the farm workers are undocumented. So they are a good resource on how to help people that are actually working on a farm. And of course, we have Rural Migrant Ministry that are more involved in social justice, leadership, hope, empowerment. So all of these are members of the team, coalitions that provide information. And then we do want to thank those of you that have gone before us. I say those of those that have opened the doors for us. The Syracuse Immigrant and Refugee Defense Network. They do a lot of issues with labor issues, regardless of documentation. They help people. The Rochester Rapid Response Network helped us, start this network here. Justice for Migrant Families in Buffalo. They do a lot of things that, or have a lot of information and support when it comes to the detention center out there and how to support detainees. And of course, the Tompkins County Immigrant Rights Coalition in Ithaca. They have all been very helpful in helping us get started and figure out how to get funds and do fundraising. And up next, I'm going to pass the baton on to Katya.
Hi, and thanks, Beverly. I'm going to give a very small slice of context just to help ground us in our practice and our scenarios and think about the different agencies and entities that we might be interacting with in this work. Next slide. So the first is thinking about ICE. There's been a lot of calls recently to dismantle ICE. ICE only came into being in 2003 after the Immigration and Naturalization Services was split into ICE and USCIS. And these, as well as other offices, were put into the post 9/11 Department of Homeland Security. ICE in particular is in charge of investigating different types of activity. Their mandate, their charge is to look at criminal activity and terrorist activity and to enforce the removal of immigrants in the court and also those ordered deported. It's in part where you then hear about discretion and programs like DACA, programs like some information on discretion that was put out as a memo in the prior Obama administration about what's a priority and what's not a priority. ICE is supposed to be looking for criminal activity. This terminology, depending on the agency, the time, the political atmosphere, can be expanded, can be contracted, but that is technically their role. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. So typically, they aren't going to spend their time going after high-profile people that they think are going to get bad press. They're not typically showing up at the marches and rallies, but they are going after people that might be identified in advance, lists from police, from different contacts, from people who were ordered to show up for court and didn't show, or waiting outside of court for people appearing for their meeting. And they also can at times go to apprehend people at stores, at their places of worship, where they live, where they think that they might find the individual that they're seeking, and then also people in their vicinity that they can justify as asking around them about their status. They also can be part of workplace raids. For us here in this area, when they do their enforcement actions and people are detained, the nearest detention center is also communication, and people do move between detention centers. So part of our work as well is often tracking people and where they might be. Next slide. One of the items of interest that's going to come up further in the trainings too is how ICE gets their work done. So they often might be lying about what they can or cannot do. So for example, ICE cannot enter private property or a home or a car or do a search. They're only supposed to stop, or if they have a reasonable suspicion, they might be carrying an arrest warrant through their own agency from DHS. It's the example on the right. It could have a name, it could have an address, it can be very scary. That is totally different than a search warrant that a police might get from a judge. It doesn't allow for entrance. And one of the key ways that we've seen advocates being able to push back, and people within the community on being able to push back on answering questions and on opening the doors of their home and speaking with them, is identifying whether they carry one of those ICE warrants or if they actually do have a legally enforceable warrant from a judge. And the key thing that would be looking for is, for one, the ICE warrant would have the DHS office and say that it's warrant for arrest and who they're looking for, versus the search warrant would have information on the name and address in addition to being signed and dated by a judge. And so the example on the left is an example of that. Next, I think. is just an overview. You can feel welcome to ask questions, mostly just trying to get through this so that we can get to the interactive part and really suss some of this out. So Customs and Border Protection is another part of the Department of Homeland Security that oversees Border Patrol. Border Patrol is another enforcement agency. ICE and Border Patrol often work very closely together. In our area, we see both. And that is because, and we have a visualization on the next slide. That is because the Border Patrol, they are really only allowed to do their enforcement activities within 100 miles of the border. And then they have extra privileges in terms of things of being able to enter private land, like walk onto a farm or a business, if they're within 25 miles of the border. We are in one of those areas, as is a huge part of New York State that is within 100 miles of the northern border. And I think that a lot of people on this call have been on the trenches of this for a while and will know what I say, but we see Border Patrol often more actively in the communities. I'm thinking about after it was increased in this area, the numbers, all those times of when I was first starting work, I used to work at Rural Migrant Ministry, and out in Wayne County, the traffic checkpoints and the raids on farms and on trailer parks and people being parked outside of Spanish masses and grocery stores, that was Border Patrol. And it was really thanks to local resistance and bad press that mitigated. But that work does still continue, much as enforcement efforts by ICE still continues. And if you click, there's a photo of another example. And so most recently, and I wasn't involved in this, and there might be people on the call who were, but if you want to take a look and see more information, recently there was a massive success where for years, Border Patrol agents were just regularly walking onto Greyhound buses in Rochester and Syracuse and asking everyone on it for their identification. And because it was within this border zone, they were able to do that. They were allowed to do that. But they put pressure on Greyhound to further define it as a private space and to help end that practice. And Greyhound did officially finally put out a policy that helps limit that. Just have to speak to the political context. I haven't even had a chance to catch my breath on all the changes that are going to be coming down the pike in terms of executive orders, in addition to the ongoing debate that is going to come up yet again about comprehensive immigration reform. Big changes underway that we'll have to look at, but those changes, they more often have to do with the process of naturalization, the process of legalization, and that can result in the future in protections for people, but they won't undo the damage that's already been done and people who are already caught up in immigration. And it, from what we've seen in the pendulum, in the same way that there was local resistance and activism in the time of Trump to redefine the role of sanctuary cities and campuses and local activities in times of more progressive politics, there can also be that pushback for enforcement, both from within the administration to try and justify and show that they can have a pathway to legalization, because on the other hand, they're cracking down on people who don't qualify, and from others who might oppose it and might take it into their own hands to do more against it. And we do have to remember as well that Obama deported more people than anyone before him. And it was during that we saw the increases locally with Border Patrol in our area. And so we have to remember that there isn't a guarantee that raids and activity in our area will stop. And that was it.
All right, and I think it's on to me. Thanks for that, Katya. All right, we're gonna just sort of keep narrowing in. This is the last part before we start to do some practice. And so it's sort of my task to give both a big picture of how Finger Lakes Rapid Response Network approaches this work, and then zero in specifically on the emergency response part of our work, which is what this training is focused on. Now, if you are here and discover that emergency response is not the thing for you, that you're more interested in driving, you're more interested in collecting materials that could offer some support like food or clothing, or you're more interested in some of the community building aspects of this work, I still think it's really useful to understand how Finger Lakes Rapid Response comes to meet some of the families we work with, which is sometimes via the emergency response process. So I think just crucial to emphasize, right, our work, we understand, and our volunteers know this, is having these three phases. There's the emergency response, when someone is in immediate crisis dealing with ICE or border protection, the kinds of follow-up work, legal and otherwise. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes, that follows that. And then, right, the work of empowerment that Beverly talked about at the beginning of this presentation, really helping folks to build from their strengths and community resources, and connect with our volunteers and one another. So we really value our volunteers and participants in all stages of this process. All right, next slide, Wilmer. Some of you may have had emergency response training with us or with others in the past, and so just wanted to speak to a few of the updates we've made given COVID conditions. So like the very first and most important thing to say, again, as Beverly said, is to know your own limits. So if you are autoimmune compromised, if you have any reason to be concerned about COVID, right, don't do anything that is bad for your health or uncomfortable for you. But for people who are interested in emergency response and want to know how we're doing this under COVID, we're asking that right, people wear masks, even if they're alone in their cars when they show up for an emergency response. We're asking that people right, can either come out, stand outside socially distanced, or remain in their cars, whichever is the better fit for you. And then I'll talk in a minute about how we'll do communications. So as simply as possible, and then I'm happy to take questions about it. At the end here, we have a Finger Lakes Rapid Response hotline. We have some cards that we deliver to farms and other people in the region who may want to access the network. It's a shared phone number, and so we have a number of operators. If you are bilingual and interested in being an operator, we always have need for more. So the operator receives that call. So unless you sign up to be an operator, you're never going to get a cold call from anyone. And then the operator, right, talks to the person on the other end of that phone, tries to figure out as much as possible, right, what's going on in the situation, and it gets some important and basic details. And then the operator, sometimes in consultation with other people, depending on how complicated the situation is, will activate the rapid response network. So if you decide you want to join the emergency side of the rapid response network, you would be part of a messaging group that would receive an alert that would say, you know, emergency in progress, can you join, and would have an address. Next slide, Wilmer. This is a little tricky to see. I'm just going to hit the highlights, and as Melina mentioned, we'll make all of this available. But this is sort of the general process for what might happen when there's an emergency call. The operator will message the group and say, right, stay tuned for a developing situation. As soon as we have an address and more details, the operator will send that. If you can't respond, you're at work, you're taking care of your kids, there's no need to respond, no need to busy the channel and say, I can't make it. You can just keep an eye on your phone, social media, and know that we'll follow up with a report after that everybody can learn from. If you are available, you're just going to respond, right? I'm on my way, say how long it's going to take you to get there, and simply message that you've arrived. Here's where our new COVID protocols potentially come into play. So if you're the first person on the scene, you don't feel comfortable getting out of your car, it's fine to stay there and wait for someone to arrive who is in a position to go to the house, go to the workplace, knock on the door. We'll have a message group of all the people who said they could be there so they can stay in touch, even if you're socially distanced. There's some roles we'll talk through in a few minutes. So at this time, we will start, people would start taking up roles and stay until the situation comes to an end. And that's always followed by a debrief. Again, under COVID conditions, if it's not possible to have a socially distanced debrief, that'll be handled over messaging. And then from the Finger Lakes Rapid Response Planning Committee, you'll always get a follow-up in terms of whether the situation was resolved and ultimately what lessons we can draw from it. All right, Wilmer, next slide. So this is just a little bit of a picture of some of the roles that you might choose to take up should you arrive at an emergency scene. I've mentioned operators. That's a special volunteer position, as is legal observer. But otherwise, right, it's really the task of the people who show up on the scene to record. So you can record by filming with your phone. You can record by scribing and taking notes. You can record by taking photographs. But our aim here is really twofold. One is to make sure that ICE or Border Patrol knows that people are watching, right? But one of the strengths of this work is when they know people are watching, they're more likely to follow the law and resolve the situation, you know, as safely and humanely as possible. And second, right, if we do have bad actors or people who are not, right, law enforcement not following the law, having that record is really helpful for people as they navigate potential deportation or other kinds of legal responses. So that's really what we're up to in that recording, and we're a team, so no one person will be responsible for doing all of it. Again, I think this is just a really important moment to remind everyone, these are tasks for emergency responders, and there are so many other tasks beyond that, right? So all of the people we need, if a family, right, is experiencing financial trouble, legal trouble, trouble with their landlord, which is often the case after something like this. These are areas where volunteers can be so helpful. All right, next slide. So this slide concerns filming specifically. I'm not going to go through every detail. I just want to highlight a few things, which is one, it is legal to film ICE and local law enforcement in public. And so you should have no qualms about taking out a cell phone or taking out a camera to record what you're seeing. This doesn't mean, right, that a law enforcement agent might not say you can't do that. It's even possible they might, right, try to take the phone. Those things aren't legal, but it's important, right, that we prepare you for it just in case. And one of, therefore, the precautions we just recommend is to avoid having fingerprint ID on your phone. And to make sure you have enough storage on your phone that you can respond to an emergency and record if that's your approach. Of course, if you're using paper and pen, different story. And I will just add here, your aim is, while you are in your legal rights to record, your aim is to de-escalate and as much as possible, right, follow the directions of law enforcement. So if someone asks you to back up, this is not the moment for a fight, right? Back on up, keep recording as it is your legal right to do. All right, next slide. So I mentioned this a few times. This is just a little picture of some of the aftermath support. Fundraising, finding a lawyer, helping find rides, and really acting as a community advocate. So really thrilled if folks want to be involved in any or all stages of this process, even as we're going to dig a little bit more into that emergency part of the work we do. All right, next slide. All right, turning it over to Melina.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Hannah. That was really helpful. And so one thing that's interesting is that if you were able to listen attentively, which I know can be hard to do in Zoom these days, you basically now have all the information you need to be a member of the Rapid Response Network. But we know that sometimes just having a brief presentation isn't quite enough to help empower you, and we haven't given you a chance to ask questions. So we want to get to a chance where we ask a few questions. And we also wanted to show you a couple of videos where people are applying the knowledge that you just heard. We do have a question in the chat. What region does the Finger Lakes Hotline cover? We were formed partly to connect the dots between Syracuse, Ithaca, and Rochester, which all have their own rapid response networks. In fact, the first call we ever got, we didn't have a trained team, was for a call in Canandaigua. The Rochester group was 40 minutes away. We were 20 minutes away. We didn't have time to make it. And so let's see, I am thinking that that was do not have fingerprint ID on your phones, John. And the reason for that is that ICE or the police can take your phone and just put your hand on it to release it. So it's better if you have a password protected phone for the highest security choice and the longest password you can think of and actually remember. Okay, so we are going to make room to answer plenty of your questions, but we did want to give you a chance to just interact and kind of work with the material and talk it through and see what your questions might actually be. So in a minute, Wilmer is going to show 2 more videos. They're very short. The first one is just 1 minute and 18 seconds long. The second one is 3 minutes and 14 seconds long. And you'll see that in both scenarios, the volunteers are applying the knowledge that we just heard about the difference between the 2 warrants. In the first scene, you'll see a community rapid response team responding. In the second scenario, you'll see a volunteer who has been trained through a similar training through ours. And so we're going to go ahead and play that and then put you into small groups of 4 people and invite you to just have a brief conversation about what you just watched. But as you watch right now, just think about what can you see in these 2 videos that's an application of the knowledge that you just heard about. Oops. Wilmer, I don't know, I'm seeing a slide that goes later in the presentation, but if you could go ahead and play the 2 videos, that would be great.
Can you guys see my screen?
I can see the PowerPoint slides still.
Oh, it's sharing. My apologies. What about now?
Yep, now I see it.
¡Vamos! Está saliendo el niño. Está saliendo el niño en este momento. Está saliendo
dos personas son las que de alguna manera se identificaron como agentes de inmigración. Mencionarle, están ahí los abogados, están tratando de ponerle gasolina. Ahorita vamos.
Your friend?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I help your friend.
Okay.
I give them about Gatorade and everything.
Okay, va a traer agua y todo eso. Perfecto. Okay. Right. Bueno, pues ahí está. ¿La está pasando? ¡Vamos! Está saliendo el niño. Está saliendo el niño en este momento. Está saliendo también el señor. Y bueno, ya están a salvo.
So Jim, thanks for the question. I'm going to save your question and invite you to talk about that in the small group in a minute. We'll watch the same, a different video and see if you can take this one in. And again, we're going to share all these materials so you'll have more time to watch it again if you need to.
Melina, are you by any chance able to, my computer just not responding for some reason?
Okay, let's see. I am going to, I can try to share it on my screen.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Just make sure I have the right thing queued before I show everybody my messy state of affairs.
You could make it a separate tab and only share that tab.
Yes, okay. I did that, thank you. Okay, so this one I think is a little clearer, but it might still be a little confusing to watch it only once. So in this one, again, just see if you can listen to what the guy who's the driver is being stopped by ICE. And he has two undocumented passengers in his car. So just listen to the conversation and how it goes and see if you can hear how he's applying what he just learned from his Know Your Rights training.
Department of Homeland Security order. It's a warrant. Okay. No, it's not a warrant. It's not a warrant under the Constitution of the United States. Warrant of arrest of alien. Yeah, warrant of arrest of alien not signed by a judge. It's not a judicial warrant. I have no obligation to oblige by that warrant. This is a lawful warrant signed by a judge of the Immigration and Nationality Act and an official designated with that authority. Are you hearing this, Mark? Yeah, our attorney's on his way. Okay. What's that gonna? That's not a warrant. That is a warrant. No, it's not. It's a Department of Homeland Security order. It's a warrant. Okay. No, it's not a warrant. It's not a warrant under the Constitution of the United States. It's a warrant under the Immigration and Nationality Act of the United States. Okay, that's fine, but it's not under the Constitution. You have no jurisdiction over me as a citizen. I'm the driver of this vehicle.
Okay, are you familiar with Title 8, Section 1324 of U.S. Code?
Somewhat.
Somewhat. In what regard?
I'm studying to be a Department of Justice accredited representative, so I've been through trainings.
Okay.
And I have copies of actually in this box right here, I have a copy of a real warrant and a copy of that, just so people know not to listen to that.
Okay, so you're aware of the statutes governing transporting and harboring illegal aliens in the United States?
I am.
Okay.
Okay. Let me just find our PowerPoint again. Wilmer's having some technical trouble, so I'm going to show the PowerPoint. All right, so I'm assuming by now you've got some questions built up. So I wanted to give you all a chance to talk in breakout rooms. And this is really an active learning strategy. It's just hard to get to know and remember new information until you have a chance to actually work with it and struggle with it yourselves. So I wanted to invite you to spend about 10 minutes or so in a breakout room. It doesn't give you that much time, but I'll put you in with 4 people and introduce yourselves very briefly, and then just discuss, what knowledge from this training is being applied in the 2 scenarios, which was the cue before the videos. And the other is, can you imagine activating the network or responding in these situations as a volunteer, as a part of a member of a group, or if you're driving folks to an appointment, how you might be able to argue with ICE about what's going on there. And meanwhile, collect your questions and bring those back, and we'll have our Q&A session. So I want to go ahead and paste those discussion questions in the chat because it's hard to remember what you're doing once you go into the chat. So this should help keep you focused. And if you don't want to do a breakout room, 10 minutes. If you don't want to do a breakout room, you don't have to. You can decline that invitation and just stay in the big room with me. So that's optional. I hear some people leaving, and I fear that it might have been the breakout room option. So, okay. 4 people per room. You can just leave the room if you want to come out. All right. And you can ask for help if you need. An invite should be heading out to you shortly. Be kind to each other, share the space for listening and talking. We have people with a range of experiences here, so somebody might have all the answers if you have tons of answers. So I'll bring you back at about 7:30. Questions that are directly about the rapid response portion, or what you learned, or if you want to just report out on what your conversation was like in your small group, that would be great too. If I could just have a couple volunteers. Anybody willing to share? Annegret?
One thing that came up was that it wasn't totally clear how the situation had evolved in video number 1, from where and in what time frame they got to a place where they had at least 15 people at this site. And that it was definitely a situation that would be more easily done in a city than out in the rural area. And also the question is, it seems like that's the kind of action where people might need to be ready to be arrested as the people who are blocking. So that's just something that hasn't actually been talked about.
Okay, great. Several questions on the table there. Anyone want to add to questions related to that first video?
So has anybody, all right, because this is just an idea that I just mentioned in that small group chat, because we were talking about just our experiences with it and then discussing like the video. One of the things that I have been trying to keep in mind, so with this rapid response, I actually did not know about this training until a little while ago, but that's honestly on me because I've been trying to figure out who around has been like participating and helping out oppressed communities. The organization that I'm with does something similar for BIPOC, but one of the concepts that I think we could bring to the table is with that first video, de-escalating it. If we actually have this rapid response and we can get more organizations in certain areas incorporated so they are aware, that's something I think that could be very helpful because it's it's from what I've gathered from the organizing that we've done, it is a numbers game. You do want to have people there because even having like the know your rights works to an extent and it really does help. Like it's definitely something that is a need to know, but occasionally like, because some like the premise of this is they don't always abide by those rules. That's why they make fake warrants. You know what I mean? There's not always like that opportunity where they're going to be in a car and not able to get in. It could be a situation where they show up. So if we do have more incorporation with organizations like within the communities that were established, it would actually help us a tremendous amount to get people there in order to prevent these situations from escalating further.
Great. Thank you so much, Rayvon. I really welcome the idea of coordinating with other groups and just building our collective strengths together and learning from each other. To respond a little bit to that video one, to be honest, I've had to watch it multiple times to try to make sense of it in relation to the work that we do and how it compares to the couple of times that we've activated our own network, which I'd like to talk about in a minute just to give you an idea. But I see that Helen has her hand raised, so please share your comment, Helen.
Thank you. I don't mean for this to come out as innocently as it may come off or as I guess naive of the legal system, but why doesn't ICE just like if ICE knows that they can't use that warrant because it's not signed by a judge, like why do they still try anyway? Are they being like told to by their higher officers or what prevents them from following the law?
Great question. So to be clear, that document that they share is not an illegal document. It's not a lie, but it's limited in its powers in terms of what they can do with that document. So that document doesn't give them permission to search a property, which is why it's an effective place to exploit in a rapid response scenario, because you can inform people that their rights, they don't have to open the door. They can talk to ICE through the door and get all the information that they need. And they don't have to let their car be searched, because in order for a search to happen, you have to have some kind of proof or evidence, and a judge has to approve that. So the warrants that they're using are administrative warrants that they're using, and they're often looking for particular individuals or people. So if they walked up to somebody on a street, they can't arrest them with that warrant. They're not breaking the law with that detention process. So I hope that makes sense. It took me a while to sort of figure out the difference between those two things. So, and you can see that sometimes volunteers don't have all the details, but the action is still effective because ICE also knows that they can't search a person's car without a warrant if the person in the car doesn't give them permission to do so, because then they'll be breaking the law. They may do so anyway, so we're always giving the caveat of, either helping to de-escalate or inform people of their rights so that people at least know where they can stand legally. And then in terms of the video where the community surrounded the car, ICE chose to walk away from that situation because they saw that it was getting heated up. But basically they were trying to wait out the people who were in the vehicle because the people weren't going to exit the vehicle. So they were running out of gas, they were getting hungry. And that's why you had this community of volunteers who started to come and film it and live stream it and put pressure on it. So in our case, you know, if you're willing to sign up for the Rapid Response Network, which we'll do at the very end of the training with a small group of people who remain who want to do that, we'll be able to answer a little bit more questions on that and explain how to do it. We're always have our door open to volunteers who would like to do anything. And even if you just want to be on our listserv to get information, we're happy to have you participate in that way, because we know that just having this information, knowing your own rights, allows you to help tell somebody else what their rights can be. And so the better informed we all are as a community in terms of this, the more we can do to change people's minds, educate, help people understand that we want our communities safe and that we're going to stand together as community members with our neighbors. All right, any other immediate questions or breakout room feedback?
I have one question that I didn't raise in the small group, but I'm just curious. The second video, to us, it seemed like he did everything right. The driver, was excellent and effective and powerful and brave. Having said all that, is there anything that, from your perspective, he should have done differently? Or if that was one of us in that situation, there's something we should have done differently than he did? Or did he pretty much, connect all the dots and do exactly the right thing?
I thought he did a fantastic job. And it's interesting in my own development and doing this work, the first time I watched that video, it was scary to me. Like, I thought I would never be able to be that kind of an advocate. And then later, the more I've been working in our Rapid Response Network and working with community members who are directly affected by this threat on a daily basis, my own courage goes up. And so now I look at that video and I'm like, yeah, that Rapid Response Network trained those people really good, like they're doing what we did. Hannah, did you have a comment?
I was only going to say, yeah, Barney, I think the driver did everything right. But what just for me, it was important that I knew I didn't have to adopt that same style, right? Like, I'm more soft-spoken, the gender performance is different. For me, like, it works better just to sort of like practice a mantra, no, I don't have to let you search the car. No, that's not legal. Right. So I think just to say, I think all the steps were great and the strength was great, but that bravery shows up in lots and lots of different ways. And it doesn't mean, it has to be super assertive.
Right. Gotcha.
I just wanted to add that since it was an excerpt and we don't see the whole situation, the people in the backseat were also active participants in the fact that they weren't speaking, which is sometimes the most important thing, is to guard your silence. And they were videotaping. And it's hard to know, but in the time in which they're being pulled over and people are walking up front, they might have taken a moment to game plan of just saying, hey, here's my approach I'm going to take as a driver. I'm going to say they can't talk to you and they can't open the car and they can't search because these are my rights. You good with that? I would suggest being quiet. If you're comfortable, you can record. They might have done a quick game plan. And just echoing from the earlier question too, is definitely something we talked about in the small breakout group, how these are examples of being able to leverage like private space versus public space. But sometimes there's fewer protections when it's in public space. And therefore, because you're not preventing people from searching something, you're having your rights to say, am I under arrest? Am I going? Some of the important work doing Know Your Rights clinics out there. But in that case, the observing is often just going back before to that earlier diagram of the simplicity of being there to take down information and be there to support and to witness and to be able to help in the aftermath.
Thank you, Katya.
When you say take down information, do you usually designate someone into the role of like getting the information from the person about like, do your cats need to be fed? Who should we call about, like your life and following up with you? What is there a person in that role usually?
So that's a great question, Megan, because you have the sort of ideal version of the roles and then you have the reality of how it plays out on on the ground, and so far it's been really different every time. And every time it requires, like the skill set that it requires are being willing to think on your feet, being able to be kind of calm under pressure, being able to have other people to help coordinate them. So if you're the first one on the scene, you're sort of the leader that helps organize everybody else. Keeping in touch with the operator who will provide support for you and create a WhatsApp group just for that group to communicate in case the incident sort of takes a longer time than it needs to. We've been in existence since May 2019, and we've had activations like 3 times, I guess. And sometimes sometimes the call will come to one of us as individuals, and then we'll deliberate briefly as a team, and then we'll decide whether or not to activate the network. So for example, one time our network was activated by a local woman whose husband and a crew of workers were in Buffalo for work, and ICE, the hotel owner called ICE to turn them in. And so ICE showed up at the hotel, and 2 of the individuals ran away. A couple stood and allowed themselves to be questioned. And you know, our response there was to try to connect to the other networks. So we have links to all the other networks in the region, to the Rochester group, the Syracuse group, and some folks in Buffalo who we were able to say, hey, can you go? Here's the location. And so that sometimes what each person needs and what each moment needs is going to be a little bit different. So it's helpful to know a little bit more, or to have an operator that you're on the phone with who might know more than you do if you're just getting started in this work. For example, Wilmer shared a story of a couple that was walking home from work. They were 10 feet away from their house, and they were stopped by a police officer who basically started harassing them, and then the police officer called ICE. And so that's something that shouldn't happen. There's no reason why local police should collude with ICE. The federal branch of things is very different from the role of the local police or state police. And so what we might do as a network, I just heard about this, is write a letter to the sheriff of that police department and basically advocate for that kind of behavior to stop. It's racist profiling behavior. We won't say that in the letter, but we'll try to say something that opens a door towards education and better decision making. The folks who were there didn't know whether they could leave or not. They thought they had to stay. They weren't trained with a Know Your Rights training, which would have been helpful for them. It would have at least empowered them to some degree. So ICE came and arrested one of them. So if they had activated our network at that point, we would have been on the phone with the person who was directly affected. We would have explained what we knew about their rights. We would have asked them if they wanted our volunteer network to arrive so that we could document the situation. And then we would not ask you to put yourself in a situation where you were going to be arrested. We would ask you to be careful and wise, stay out of it's really there to document and witness, to help build that, hold them accountable, to keep track, to have them know that the community cares about our own neighbors and that we're going to show up for them. And we do think that these actions have deterred ICE and changed the way that they behave. We know that ICE, for example, the Rochester Rapid Response Network did a long campaign on getting Greyhound buses to change their policy about letting federal officers and ICE do searches on the buses. So now they don't allow that anymore. Before they just kind of let them on the bus, and so people couldn't travel on the Greyhound bus in peace without fear of being asked to show their documents. Okay. But the question that you had about what will you do to help the folks, that's the aftermath question. And so yes, you could ask the person, okay, it looks like you're likely to get detained. Is there anybody at home that we can help you get information to, that we can work with to help advocate for you? So we do offer supports like helping people find legal support. Sometimes we do bail bond fundraising, and we try to provide up to a month's worth of material support to a family who's left in the lurch by losing their main provider, for example. We do food drives and other things like that. So we definitely need those kinds of volunteers as well, yes. Yeah. All right. Okay. Have I answered all the questions? I don't know if I'm missing some in the chat that happened.
There's a hand that's Annette. Annegret
I have a quick
has a
question.
question.
So the guy in the car basically had a lawyer on the phone. And is that something that you have in the Finger Lakes Rapid Response Network? You have a lawyer that's always able to respond to calls like this?
No, I don't. We don't have like a lawyer in our back pocket. We have lawyers that we reach out to for legal questions. I've never thought to ask any one of them if they would be willing to do that kind of work. Like if we're in a hot rapid response moment, can I just call you? But that's a great suggestion. I think it makes us feel better to have the lawyer on the phone because they understand all the details of the nitty-gritty of the law. In that scenario, he didn't really need his lawyer, actually. I think that was more of a moral support move and an extra intimidation for the ICE people, because even the ICE people were like, so you got your lawyer, what's that for? Like they're sort of teasing him about that. But he actually had all the information that he needed, which is like, I'm sorry, you can't search my car.
Right. He was trying to use it as a power card.
Yeah. So we could, if we needed to do that, I would probably call the Workers' Justice Center. But yeah. We also had a call once with somebody, ICE had come to their door the day before and the person that they were looking for wasn't there. So she called the network and then got all the Know Your Rights coaching from the operator because she didn't know not to give information about the person wasn't there. So a person, you know, you don't have to give, the remain silent thing is always a handy tool to have. Don't give information about other people. Don't open the door and let them in. They'll just take advantage of that. Okay. So I want to move to the next section, which is actually to do a quick poll, and then we'll put the slide back up. So this is the first time I'm doing a Zoom poll, y'all. And we'll have another Q&A period. Lincoln, I see your hand up, but just answer the questions first. Do you feel ready to join our rapid response team? Go ahead and vote on it. And then also the
By the way, though, if
coming
you said
anonymous.
maybe or no, what more do you need is a required question. So even if you say yes, answer it. What else do you want?
I'm a little confused by this because I'm under the impression that I'm in the Syracuse Rapid Response team. So,
So I was wondering if you can be two at the same time.
No, I don't see myself as being rapid when I'm an hour away from something.
Yeah.
Okay,
We were
that's
hoping
fine.
to use this to recruit local volunteers, but of course, there's just great cross-pollination here with other groups.
I'm going to
so-
say no because of
Yeah.
the distance, but you won't find out my other stuff because that is not a choice.
Thank you, Annegret.
Did I miss the point where we had more explanation of this multiple choice question 3? I have an idea what the first one is, but I'm less clear on the second option.
So the second option, this was just to get a kind of a temperature check on if you're interested in coming to a future training, what would be interesting for you to attend. We were thinking of doing a How Detention Works workshop because we realized that a lot of our volunteers were super fuzzy on the details on what happens after somebody actually is detained and arrested. And then another thought we had was that we would read a chapter from Border Patrol Nation together. There's a chapter on SOTUS New York, and we would just do like one reading group session. And we're also thinking that we'd be likely to run a practice session for our rapid response network to just activate the network and test it out.
That was another block on there.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll and show the results and hand it over to Kathleen for a few minutes, and she's gonna help us get to the end. Okay. So I'm going to share the results here just out of curiosity.
Okay, yes. Okay, so for our first question, do you feel ready to join our rapid response team? We have 40% saying yes. That's wonderful and good to hear. But we do have some no's and some maybes, and that's okay too. There's a lot of ways that people can help that's not in rapid response. So if you don't feel like it's something that you're ready to do right now, that's okay too. And if you said maybe or no, what more do you need? And the biggest answer looks like practice. And that's also good feedback for us to know, where we should focus our attention in terms of coming up with other workshops. And that a lot of times when somebody gets more practice, it kind of helps with making that decision on whether they will want to, in the long run, become a member of the Rapid Response Network. And what programs are you most interested in participating in? Next, we have both relevant reading discussions and how detention works, a detention workshop. So those are both great answers and things that we can look towards pursuing for our next workshop. So I think we can look for, time to develop these other workshops, and hopefully we can, provide more information that can help you with making that decision. So we can open up for additional questions and answer session. If anybody else has questions they want to put in the chat box, we can look towards providing some answers, and that might help with making a decision on whether you'd like to join the Rapid Response Network now.